All right. Well, it's 2 o'clock. Let's get cracking. So hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Scott Mcintyre, and I'm currently in my third term as president of the CfPA. For those of you on the call who are unfamiliar with our organization, the Crowdfunding Professional Association is known as a U.S. trade group for the alternative finance industry. And we were founded by many of the same pioneers that were responsible for getting crowdfunding as a thing into the Sweeping Jobs Act of 2012. And one of those pioneers, and actually one of our co-founders and a current board member, is with us today. That's Sara Hanks. I will detail a little bit more about Sara's background in a moment, but thank you for joining us, Sara. So since 2012, our work has been primarily in the background. We're not exactly a crowd-facing organization quite yet, but we've been primarily dedicated to gathering consensus from both issuers, entrepreneurs, SMEs, intermediaries, legislators, and regulators in order to ensure that the rules of the road in our new industry are in keeping with the intent of the Jobs Act in its originality, namely to continue to democratize access to finance and level the investment playing field for everyone, which drives growth in all sectors. So we've been fairly focused in the background, but as you'll hear about in a moment, we're beginning to blossom as an organization. Part of today's purpose was to introduce you to our background and our services as a nonprofit trade group, and also to enlist your support as a volunteer, as many of us are. So in the last year, we've successfully enlisted some of the industry's brightest minds and tireless voices to help guide us into our next phase. And as a crowd-facing trade organization, we'll be able to offer more education and training content, more networking opportunities, have a robust service professionals registry, and hopefully a more visible presence on the Hill. Obviously, part of our work is to ensure that future legislation and regulations are in kind with, again, the intent of crowdfunding inclusion in the Jobs Act. So if you're interested in any of these areas, you're welcome to join us as a member or volunteer for leadership. And you will find information at CfPA.org on our website, and contact information is there as well. And you can reach out to us. So as regards Lunch and Learn, today's event, this will be a regular feature at the CfPA. Where we will interview and be entertained by some of the professionals leading our industry and on issues specific to their domain expertise. We will be meeting with other board, committee, and advisory council members, as well as people from all over the country and both domestic and abroad. If you have any subjects that you would like covered in future sessions, please just let us know and we'll be happy to add those to our agenda. So with that, I want to introduce Sara Hanks. Sara, in quick background here, is the CEO of CrowdCheck, and she's also a partner at CrowdCheck Law, both pivotal firms providing together legal, diligence, and disclosure services for online capital formation. In plain English, Sara and her companies provide investors with information they need to make informed decisions, and at the same time help issuers and intermediaries comply with regulations. Sara has served the U.S. government, in fact, overseeing the Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP, which you might remember. An important time in our career. And she has advised clients on capital markets worldwide and has worked for the SEC after beginning her career in law, having received her degree from Oxford University. Sara also holds a Series 65 license as a registered investment advisor. So let's get into it. Today's title is FinTech in DC. It's an update on legislative and regulatory affairs on the Hill that affect the crowdfunding industry and alternative finance community. Thank you, Sara, for joining us and for sharing your valuable time with us today. I will reserve my questions for you after you introduce your subjects and cover those in the event that our listeners may have similar questions. So off to the races, Sara. Thank you.
Okay, let's hope that this actually works. Can you tell me that you can see that screen?
I can see you.
Okay.
There we go.
There we go. All right.
I still don't see your slides though yet. There you are. Very good.
Okay. All right. So the way we were setting this up is I'm going to chunter on for about 10 minutes on a few things that I think are of interest to our group. 10 minutes is a really, really short period for some of the things that are going on or not going on the Hill. I know that it was very difficult to sort of narrow down as I tried to think about the things that the crowdfunding community would like, either from the regulators or from the legislators. Things that we seem to be focusing on most falls into these general categories. I mean, one thing that we would all like is some form of clarity on crypto issues. The one thing that everybody is focusing on with respect to crypto is the one thing that I think has stopped being interesting right now, which is the whole, what is a security? Can we get some guidance either from the Hill or from the SEC on when is something a security? And I think that the reason I say it's got a little boring is that most of the things that people have been promoting have turned out to be securities at one point, even though they might not be securities in the future. And there's still a huge amount of debate about how to give guidance on whether something is cryptocurrency and therefore is regulated by the CFTC, whether it's a security and therefore is regulated by the SEC, or whether it is just a laundrette token and therefore would be regulated by the FTC. Most folks have kind of moved on from that in my own experience, and have accepted that there are at least some things that might be securities now, might not be securities later, and we're really focusing on how to deal with them as securities as opposed to identifying whether they are or not. So we are expecting at some point that the SEC will come up with a statement as clarifying as to whether things are securities or not. But what we really truly need is clarity on things like the functionality of crypto assets in general. So for example, what does it mean to custody a security if you don't have a physical share certificate, if you don't have an entry in a ledger? In the crypto world, it's just a series of protocols on a blockchain. Who holds it? Who transfers it? That's really important. There's a very, there is a sort of outdated attitude as to what it means to hold a security, what it means to hold currency. Same thing applies to trading. We need to have some clarity with respect to trading concepts and transfer concepts, as opposed to just is it a security or not. Another thing that the community would very much like is a change to the accredited investor definition. And as you'll see when we get into this a little bit more, this is one area where I think there are some, there's a movement coming together where we might actually see some change here. Part of the argument of the community has been along the lines of, falsely, only 2% of the population is accredited, therefore 98% or 97% or something like that of the citizenry can't invest in private securities. Not actually true. When you look at the SEC's record, the SEC's data, which comes from Federal Reserve triennial survey, they're showing 10% or more of the population as accredited. That kind of hides the real fact, the real issue here, which is the people who actually want to invest, as opposed to the very, the older senior people who are accredited just because they've got a holiday home that's worth more than $1 million. The people who really need to be able to have access are the ones who hold a Series 7 but are still too young to have built up a serious amount of money, or the guys at the SEC, or the guys at the House Financial Services. Those people need to be allowed not to be excluded from private investments. So that's something that's still very much needed. People would like to be able to use SPVs in crowdfunding. Not everybody agrees on this. There are some of the crowdfunding platforms who think that direct ownership and direct record of ownership is the way to go. But if you had the ability to use a special purpose vehicle, you would be able to address the so-called messy cap table that a lot of venture capitalists are rumored to be terrified of. And you would have the ability to negotiate with one person when corporate events like a takeover or an acquisition happen. And it would be much easier, for example, to address one issue that I think we're going to see in spades when crowdfunding's been around for a few years, and that is lost shareholders. You invest 500, 200, 100 bucks in an investment, you might not keep a very good record of it. There might be lots of people who don't keep particularly good records. There are going to be, in the future, thousands of lost shareholders, and the ability to use SPVs means that the lost shareholder problem is the problem of the person running the special purpose vehicle, not the issuer. So it might, not everybody wants to use SPVs, but it would be nice to have that ability. Another area that we see coming up again and again is the increase in Reg CF offering size. Some people would like it to go up to 5 million or possibly even 20 million. Then we also have a huge area of concern, which is liquidity. We hear again and again, we need venture exchanges, we need regulations. Now, of course, our friends at the OTC would say, what are we, chopped liver? Because they are in fact a venture exchange. Venture exchanges do already exist, but people are very much focused on liquidity. And they would like more options for trading, more trading forums, and they would like those to be encouraged by legislative or regulatory means. Not everybody wants liquidity, of course. While on the one hand, we've got a number, we at CrowdCheck have a number of clients who are like, we would do Reg A, but there's no liquidity, so we're not doing it. So for them, it's really important. On the other hand, there are some companies who don't actually want liquidity for a couple of reasons. One is they want to stay truly private until they are ready to be a traded company. And then the second reason they want to not have liquidity is once you do, you are at the mercy of the market. Once you create a market, you might have gone out at a valuation of, I don't know, $40 million for your Reg CF. I saw one of those recently. And if you're selling at $5 a share, but trading is now happening at $1 a share, you are not going to be able to go back and raise funds at $5 a share anymore. So there is a tyranny of the markets that I think people are going to have to come to grips with if and when they get listed or quoted on a trading forum. A final category of clarity issues that we would like is some idea of under what circumstances somebody who introduces investors to a company is going to be deemed to be a broker-dealer. This is very much a Reg A, Reg D issue as opposed to Reg CF, where you've got your regulated entity is the funding portals. But there's a lot of non-broker platforms out there, and a lot of people who know people who would love to introduce investors to the to companies who are looking for investment if they could only get some reassurance that they would be not violating securities laws by making those introductions. The reason that it's really important for crowdfunding companies is if you use an unregistered broker-dealer to raise funds, you have now created a permanent put over your securities because all of the securities you've sold that way are subject to rescission. So there's a number of things that the crowdfunding community would like, and I apologize to everybody who I've missed off their pet projects. There's more of them. So what are we going to get in 2019? Yes, that slide is blank. Yes, I am being cynical, but seriously, I don't think that we're going to get a lot moving over the course of the next, the rest of the 116th. We're going to get more out of the SEC than I think we are on the Hill. Big things for everybody to look out for at the moment is the fact that at the SEC, there is a Reg CF 3-year review. We're coming up on the 3-year anniversary of Regulation CF. The SEC is required to put out a review, a 3-year look back. I'm expecting more questions than answers here. It would be lovely if the SEC was able to say, hey, we've noticed the following problems, so we're tweaking our rules in the following ways. Unfortunately, they can't do that. Rulemaking at the SEC always has to follow a pattern, which is first there is a proposal, then people make comments on it. The SEC then takes those comments into consideration and then issues an adopting release. So it is possible that the 3-year look back might include some proposals for rule changes. My expectation is probably not. We may well get some interpretations. We may well get the SEC pointing out where there have been points of failure. I think there have been some fairly significant ones that we've noticed in terms of failure to comply with the initial disclosure rules of Regulation CF on Form C. We have also noticed a huge failure of ongoing reporting. A very large number of companies who are supposed to be reporting on an annual basis, who still seem to exist as far as we can tell. So they should be filing an annual report on Form CAR. They're not. I think the SEC is probably going to be pointing out some of those and maybe giving us some guidance in some of the areas that that we do need some guidance in. One area I would love the SEC to focus on, that they're probably not going to, is better coordination with Finra. One of the things that we have seen with Reg CF across the board that keep coming up is Finra, who is the regulator of the funding portals, seems to take a much more expansive view of the duties of the funding portal than the SEC does. The SEC sees funding portals as broker-dealer light, whereas Finra seems to think that they should do all of the things that that true broker-dealers or investment banks do, including valuation. We do keep running up against them on that. So I would like to see that. Probably we're not going to see it. Other thing to watch out for with the SEC is they are planning a mega release on all of the exempt offerings. We have so many different exemptions from registration. There is Regulation A for offerings up to 50 million, Regulation D for offerings to accredited investors, Regulation S for overseas, Regulation crowdfunding CF for crowdfunding, Rule 701 for offerings to employees. Every single one has got different rules about what you can say and when you can say it and who you can say it to. Different rules with respect to testing the waters, different rules as to who is allowed to use the exemption. Can you be Canadian or do you have to be US? Well, it depends which rule. The regulations overlap, the regulations are inconsistent, eligibility is completely different. Chairman Clayton has said, you know what, this is all nuts. We should have something more rational. So we can expect to see some form, I think it's probably going to be a concept release, which says, here's everything we got. How should we change these? How should we make it more rational? How should we make it easier for small companies to work their way up the various exemptions? Accredited investors, I would not at all be surprised if the SEC were to actually do something on accredited investors without waiting for the Hill. And then I think as the other thing that we're going to see from regulation from the SEC is more regulation by enforcement on the crypto area. On the Hill, I just wanted to flag a few things. The 116th Congress is a very different creature than the 115th Congress. I just wouldn't expect that we are going to see as much action on small business or on capital raising at all. One thing that I did like is the Token Taxonomy Act in the House. There is a very good definition of what it is, what cryptocurrency is, what it isn't, and I think that will be very helpful. I think that one was pretty well, it was very well drafted, by the way. Other things on the Hill, there will bits, I say in the slide, will bits of Jobs Act 2.0. It was actually Jobs Act 3.0. 2.0 was the tweaks that got made in the FAST Act at the end of 2015. Jobs Act 3.0 had 32 separate bills. It was passed in the House overwhelmingly, I might say. And then went on to the Senate to die, as pretty much everything does go to the Senate to die. But that included some bills about governing SPVs, angel financing, general solicitation. If any of them get revived, I would think only it would be a very small number of them. I would hope that the SPVs and maybe one or two of the general solicitation angel financing ones would. Then again, accredited investors. I think the SEC will probably beat the hell to it, but you know, there is some interest in expanding the definition of accredited investors. And then finally, I just wanted you to flag a couple of things. Please watch out for this thing, the Corporate Transparency Act of 2019. This requires, it's anti-money laundering. And you might go, well, why on earth are we against anti-money laundering? Of course we think that's evil. But the problem is that this is a very vaguely drafted statute. It requires that a newly formed company, whether it's a corporation or an LLC, tell Treasury basically who owns it, and then it would be gradually expanded to all corporations. So any company, however long ago it was formed, unless it falls in one of the exemptions, would have to tell the Treasury Department, FinCEN, who owns it. Why is this so unfair? It's because all of the exemptions apply to anybody that's got any kind of large operations, and it's only going to catch small companies, for example, companies with revenues less than 5 million and employees less than 20. So that would include CrowdCheck. And anybody who does not file with Treasury is going to become a criminal. So lovely. Not looking forward to that one. People should take a look at that and talk to their representatives. There are also currently proposals by the SEC to let all public companies test the waters with institutions. The way that the proposals at the moment are drafted, it applies to all the large companies. And you might say, well, why are we talking about large companies here? It's because with this proposal, which is in effect, if you're a very large company, you can test the waters with certain qualified institutions. If you're an emerging market, emerging growth company, you can test the waters. If you're Reg A, you can test the waters to everybody, but you've got to include a legend. You've got to file your stuff with the SEC. And if you're raising under Regulation CF, you can't test the waters at all. Let's do something rational here. Let's dump the regulation of offers. Other jurisdictions don't do it, just regulate sales. If you offer to people who can't take up the offering, who cares? So if anyone is interested in commenting on the larger proposal to say, let's change the testing the waters rules altogether for all companies, that would be fantastic. And then finally, just wanted to mention for the lawyers among you, the American Bar Association has established a securities token task force, which is doing various things, including a taxonomy project, because if you don't know what something, if you're not talking about the same thing, then you can't regulate it, and we need to have a common language as to what it is we're talking about. And with that, I think, Scott, over to you.
Well, I appreciate that, Sarah. That was an excellent overview, and I think you've actually covered most of the questions that you helped prepare for this conversation earlier. So I will say that we're right down to the mark. We've got about 2.5 minutes left. So if anyone is interested in commenting or has a question, you can unmute if you're calling in on the telephone by hitting *6, or just unmuting if you're on a computer screen. You should see your mute button in the lower left corner, at least in my version of Zoom. So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or voice, and we'll let know. In the meantime, you can also chat questions to us. There's a chat box that you can see at the bottom of the screen that allows you to type in a message if you prefer to go that way. So Sarah, I think we talked a little bit about accredited investors, and one of the questions, I guess a sub-question of that is, how do you see an organization like the CfPA taking up that issue of accredited investors, and exactly what does it mean when there may be some novice investors or some first-time investors here on the call?
Yeah, so one of the things that the subcommittee, the subcommittee on what are we called, legislative and regulatory affairs.
That's the one.
Yep. So we are putting together a letter to anyone who'll listen to us, including the Hill, on exactly how this would work, with some concrete suggestions. The problem is that the accredited investor concept, people keep saying, well, we shouldn't expand it to include professional people, but you do need some kind of specificity, and that's one of the things that the letter is working on.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think we find comes up often in live events that we do. People say, well, what's the problem? And it's pretty easy to summarize that not all people who inherit wealth are necessarily brilliant investors, and equally, not all people who could be well studied in finance and economics are rich people. So there seems to be a lot of room for improvement in accredited investor rules. So I look forward to seeing that come down as well. It is actually, for those of you who don't know much about the CfPA, the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Division is the largest committee that we have at the CfPA. I think we've got 17 people on that committee. So we have great expectations that this will be a year we can hopefully get some voice on the Hill, despite Sarah's predictions that this will be a miserable year for Congress. So we'll get there. You talked a little bit about testing the waters. I think that's a bit in the weeds, and I think that people can revisit this recording, which will be available on the website. And I will show those of you who are still with us where you can go with that. I will take a screen share very quickly and show you where you will find that information on the web here. So you should be seeing my main screen now. Is that right? You see my mouse running around? Hopefully, yeah. If not, cfpa.org, and you will see there's information here about us. You can join the CfPA as an individual or as a company, where you get multiple memberships and listing and sponsorship opportunities. And then you can find more information on a daily basis on the CfPA Eco, which is an expert community online. You can actually ask questions of our members, of our leadership, directly through that. Some free and some for fee. And you'll also find in the media news section here on the right-hand side of the menu where this recording will be archived, so you're free to dig into that. Did you have any lasting opinions, Sarah, on petitions to regulators, for instance? I know that was a question that you thought might come up.
Yeah, I think that one of the things I wanted to say about petitions is that the things that work best is when you go to the regulators or the legislators with very, very specific requests. We want to do this, we can do this because of this, here's the legal reasoning, here's the data. Just asking for stuff without doing the work is nowhere near as effective as where you do the homework, because they're doing a lot of stuff on the Hill, and this is why lobbyists do so well, because they come to them with here's all of our papers, and you can rely on all of this stuff. That's what gets results, is if you go to them with the homework already done, as opposed to saying, we want you to fix this, please do something.
Great. I think that might actually be a good opportunity for anyone that is truly interested in the space and has ideas on how to repair it, take advantage of the CfPA's reputation and presence on the committee and in the Hill. So please bring it to us, and we're happy to co-sponsor it or help you improve whatever language you may have. And then one last thought was on liquid markets. What do you see developing? Do you see any new exchanges taking place? Any areas that we're going to see some movement in the ability to sell otherwise liquid securities?
Yeah, one of the rumors at present is that the SEC has a moratorium on any trading forums that have anything to do with tokens, digital securities of any kind. Now, there's at least a couple of forums out there that do already have Finra licenses to do that kind of trading. So the horse is kind of out of the barn on that one. And to the extent that that is the case, it's kind of unfair to say, well, you guys are planning to do tokens and we don't understand what tokens are, so stop until we know. That is not the way to do regulation. So hopefully, I would hope that the regulators would recognize that they're going to have to let people trade tokens at some point soon, and that there are already people out there who are permitted to do so.
Do you think some of the movement in areas like France or Gibraltar or even starting to spark in Puerto Rico are going to have any any catalyzing effect on these developments?
Well, Puerto Rico's here, so
Right.
I don't know. I mean, truly foreign exchanges, are they going to influence? Probably only ever negatively. People are going to look at the Canadians who ran away with all the money and go, oh dear, no, we need to not make any changes at all in case that happens again.
Well, thank you so much. I think we're pretty much right on the money at 30 minutes, folks. So any other questions? Let's see. I don't see any in the chat box. Anyone want to raise their hand and say a farewell question? Otherwise, I think we're going to sign off. So thank you again, Sarah, for making your time today. And Devin, thank you for setting this up. And we'll see you hopefully in a month or so with another edition of Lunch and Learn. Bye, everybody.